I was sitting in my living room in Charlotte, drinking my morning coffee, when my son walked through my front door without knocking. His face was red, jaw tight, and I knew, before he even opened his mouth, that whatever came next wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. "Dad, we need to talk about your spending. My name is Robert Lawrence. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 42 years building Lawrence Construction from a one-man operation with a used pickup truck into a company that employed 67 people at its peak. I sold that business 3 years ago for $4.2 million. After taxes and settling some debts, I walked away with $2.8 million in liquid assets. Not bad for a kid who grew up in a 2-bedroom house on Beatty's Ford Road with 5 siblings. But apparently, my son Marcus thought I was spending his money. Before we go further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened over the next 6 months taught me more about family, entitlement, and legacy than I'd learned in nearly 7 decades on this earth. Marcus stood in my living room that Tuesday morning, arms crossed, looking at me like I was some kind of reckless teenager who'd crashed the family car. He's 41 years old, my only child, married to a woman named Vanessa who I've never quite warmed to, if I'm being honest. They live in a $620,000 house in Ballantine, drive-matching German SUVs, and apparently spend a lot of time thinking about my bank account. Dad, Vanessa and I have been looking at your finances. I set my coffee down. Slow. You've been doing what now? Looking at your spending. You've taken 4 trips in the last 8 months. You bought a new car. You're donating to the church, to the NAACP, to your old fraternity. Dad, you're burning through your inheritance. I let that word sit there between us for a moment. Inheritance. Like the money I'd earned. Through my own sweat, my own risk, my own sleepless nights worrying about payroll, was somehow already his. Like I was just holding it for him, until I had the decency to die and get out of his way. Marcus, I worked for that money, every dollar of it, and we appreciate that. We do. But Dad, you're 68 years old. You need to think about your legacy, about what you're leaving behind. You can't just waste it on cruises and donations and whatever else you're spending on. Waste it. That's what he called it. The trip I took to Ghana last year, to see the door of no return at Cape Coast Castle, to walk the land my ancestors were stolen from, that was waste. The $15,000 I donated to Johnson C. Smith University to fund scholarships for kids who look like we do, that was waste. The 2024 Cadillac CT5 I bought, because I'd driven used vehicles my entire adult life and figured I'd earned the right to something nice. That was waste. I stood up, looked my son in the eye. Marcus, I appreciate your concern, but my finances are my business, not yours. Not Vanessa's, mine. His expression hardened. Dad, I'm trying to help you. We're trying to help you. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe it's your age, maybe it's, I don't know. But someone needs to step in before you give away everything our family worked for. Our family. Like he'd been there. Mixing concrete at 5 a.m., bidding on jobs that kept me up at night. Dealing with clients who tried to lowball me because of the color of my skin. Our family. I think you should go, son. He didn't move, just stared at me. And then he said something I'll never forget. You're being selfish. That money isn't just yours. It's our future. My kid's future. And you're throwing it away like it doesn't matter. Like we don't matter. Then he left, door slamming behind him. And I stood there in my living room. The same living room where I'd taught him to tie his shoes. Where we'd watched him open Christmas presents. Where I'd hugged him the day he graduated from North Carolina A&T. And I felt something I'd never felt toward my son before. Disappointment. Deep, aching disappointment. But here's what I didn't know yet. That conversation was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a decision already made. I wasn't going to let this stand. I'd spent 35 years building a reputation in this community, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own son, make me feel guilty for living my life. But I needed information first, real information, not assumptions or anger. I called my attorney, Gerald Thompson. We'd known each other since 1987, both members of Alpha Phi Alpha. Both grew up on the west side of Charlotte. He picked up on the second ring. Robert, what's going on? Gerald, I need to talk to you about estate planning. And I need to know, legally, what my son can and can't do regarding my assets. We met that Thursday at his office on South Tryon Street. I laid out the whole situation. Gerald listened, made notes. And when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. Robert, your son has zero legal claim to your assets while you're alive. Zero. That money is yours. You can spend every penny of it if you want to. Buy a yacht, move to Bali, fund 100 scholarships. It's your money, your life, your choice. But what about after I'm gone? I do have a will. Everything goes to Marcus. That hasn't changed. Gerald nodded. Right now, yes. But Robert, I'm saying this as your friend, not just your lawyer. You might want to reconsider that arrangement. What your son said to you, that's not concern. That's entitlement. And entitlement doesn't get better with a big payout. I thought about that. Long and hard. But Marcus was still my son. I kept hoping. Maybe this was just a phase. Maybe Vanessa was pushing him. Maybe he'd come to his senses. 2 weeks later, I found out just how wrong I was. I was having dinner at Murd's Heart and Soul on North College Street. Thursday night, around 6:30. I just ordered the fried chicken and collard greens when I saw them. Marcus and Vanessa, sitting 3 tables away. They hadn't seen me yet. I was partially hidden by a support column. And that's when I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp, clear, carrying across the room. I'm telling you, Marcus, he's going to blow through all of it, every single dollar. And we'll be left with nothing, after everything we've put up with. All the family dinners, all the fake smiles. We deserved that money. We've earned it. Marcus said something I couldn't hear, his voice lower, but Vanessa kept going. No. You need to push harder. Talk to him about power of attorney. Tell him it's for his own protection. Once we have control of those accounts, we can stop this madness. He doesn't need $2.8 million to live out his days. $500,000 is plenty. The rest should be secured. For us. For our future. I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, listening to my daughter-in-law and my son, who said nothing to contradict her. Plot to take control of my life savings, money I'd earned, money that represented every early morning, every late night, every risk I'd ever taken. They wanted power of attorney. They wanted control. And they thought $500,000 was plenty for me to live on. Like I was some kind of expense they needed to minimize. Some liability to be managed. I didn't confront them that night. I paid my bill, walked out the back exit, and drove home. But something had shifted inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't Vanessa pushing Marcus into something he didn't really want. This was a plan, a calculated, deliberate plan, and my son was fully on board. Over the next month, Marcus called me 6 times. Each conversation followed the same pattern. He'd start with small talk, ask about my health, then slowly, carefully, work his way toward my finances, suggesting I might want help organizing things, mentioning how complicated estate planning could be, dropping hints about power of attorney, about making things easier for everyone. I played along, acted like I was considering it, but really, I was watching, learning, taking notes. Because at 68 years old, I'd learned something important. Patience defeats arrogance, every single time. I started documenting everything, every phone call, every conversation, every suggestion Marcus made. I kept a journal, dated entries, direct quotes when I could remember them. Gerald had told me that if things escalated, if Marcus actually tried to claim I was incompetent or unable to manage my affairs, I'd need evidence, proof that I was of sound mind, that I knew exactly what I was doing, but I did something else too, something Marcus had no idea about. I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Patricia Monroe. She's a neuropsychologist, one of the best in Charlotte. I explained the situation, asked her to do a complete cognitive evaluation, test my memory, my reasoning, my decision-making capacity, everything. I wanted documentation, official documentation, that I was completely mentally competent. Dr. Monroe put me through 2 hours of testing, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks, questions about current events, math problems, pattern recognition. At the end, she smiled. "Mr. Lawrence, your cognitive function is well above average for your age group. There's absolutely nothing wrong with your mental capacity. You're sharp as ever." She gave me a written report, dated, signed, notarized. I put it in a folder with Gerald, along with my financial records, my medical records, everything that proved I was exactly who I'd always been, a competent, intelligent man, making informed decisions about his own life. But Marcus didn't know about any of this. He thought I was just his confused old father, standing in the way of what he believed was rightfully his. The pressure kept building. In March, Marcus showed up at my house with printed spreadsheets. He'd somehow gotten access to estimates of my spending. Not exact numbers, but close enough. He'd calculated that at my current rate, I'd have less than $1.5 million left within 3 years. He presented this like it was some kind of crisis, like I was on the verge of poverty. "Dad, look at these numbers. You're spending down your assets too fast. You need to stop the trips, stop the donations, live more modestly, preserve what you have left." I looked at the spreadsheets, looked at my son, and felt a sadness I can't quite describe. Because what I saw in his eyes wasn't concern. It was calculation. He was looking at me like I was a problem to solve, an obstacle to overcome, not his father, not the man who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education, not the man who'd co-signed his first car loan, not the man who'd walked him through his first heartbreak and taught him to drive, and sat in the audience at every one of his high school basketball games. I was just standing between him and money. "Marcus, I hear you. I do. But I'm going to keep living my life the way I see fit. I've earned that right." His jaw tightened. "Fine. Then don't come crying to us when you run out of money and need help. We're trying to protect you. But if you won't listen, that's on you." He left, again. And I sat there thinking about something my father told me before he died. "Son, you find out who people really are when money's involved. Not before. Not in the good times, when money's on the table. That's when you see the truth." I was seeing the truth now, and it was breaking my heart, but I wasn't broken. Not even close. Because while Marcus was busy calculating his inheritance, I was calculating something else entirely. I was 3 months into a plan he didn't even know existed. A plan that was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. I spent April and May being very quiet. I stopped arguing with Marcus, stopped pushing back. When he called to give me financial advice I didn't ask for, I just said, "I'll think about it," or "You might be right." I let him think he was wearing me down. Let him think that maybe, just maybe, I was starting to see things his way. Meanwhile, I was meeting with Gerald every other week. We were restructuring everything: my estate, my assets, my entire financial legacy. And I was building something Marcus would never see coming. Because I realized something important. I didn't just want to protect my money. I wanted to teach my son a lesson about respect, about gratitude, about what legacy actually means. See, Marcus thought legacy was money in a bank account, a number on a balance sheet. But I knew better. Legacy is the values you pass down, the impact you make, the lives you touch. And if my son couldn't understand that, well, maybe it was time he learned. I created something called the Lawrence Family Foundation, a private charitable trust. I transferred $2.1 million into it. The foundation had one purpose: to fund scholarships and community development projects in Charlotte's historically black neighborhoods. The foundation had a board of directors, 5 people, including Gerald, my pastor, Reverend James Crawford from Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, Dr. Sharon Ellis, who runs the community center on Beatty's Ford Road, and 2 of my former employees. People who understood hard work, people who understood legacy. Marcus wasn't on that board, and he never would be. The remaining $700,000, I kept that for myself. To live on, to travel with, to enjoy, to spend however I damn well pleased. I calculated it out. Even if I lived to 95, even if I spent lavishly, $700,000 was more than enough. And if I didn't live that long, well, the foundation would get that too. I didn't tell Marcus any of this, not yet, because timing is everything. On June 12th, a Thursday morning, I called Marcus, told him I wanted to have dinner, that I'd been thinking about what he said, that maybe he was right, that maybe I needed to be more careful with my spending. He agreed immediately, probably thought he'd finally gotten through to me. We met that Saturday at Del Frisco's Grill in South Park. 6 p.m. reservation. Marcus showed up 15 minutes late. Vanessa wasn't with him. He ordered an expensive scotch. Looked relaxed, confident, like he'd already won. Dad, I'm glad you called. Really, I know these conversations haven't been easy, but I want you to know, everything Vanessa and I have said, it comes from a place of love. We just want what's best for you. And for the family, I nodded. Let him talk. He went on for a while, explaining his vision for my money, how I should live comfortably but modestly, how the bulk of my assets should be preserved for future generations, how he and Vanessa had already started thinking about what they'd do with the inheritance, pay off their house, upgrade Vanessa's SUV, maybe buy a vacation property, start a college fund for the kids they were planning to have. All my money, all my years of work, reduced to a checklist of things my son wanted to buy. When he finally stopped talking, I took a sip of my water, then I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a manila envelope, set it on the table between us. "What's this?" Marcus asked. "Open it." He did. Inside was a single piece of paper, a bank statement, from my primary checking account at Wells Fargo, the account Marcus knew about, the account he'd been obsessing over for months. The current balance as of June 10th was $47,382.16. Marcus stared at it, confused. "Dad, where's the rest? Where's... This can't be right. You had nearly $3 million. Where did it go?" "It went exactly where I wanted it to go, Marcus. I created a charitable foundation, the Lawrence Family Foundation. I transferred $2.1 million into it. That money will fund scholarships and community projects for the next 30 years, maybe longer. It's going to help kids who remind me of myself, Kids who need a chance, a break. Someone who believes in them. The color drained from Marcus's face. You gave away $2 million? To strangers? Dad, that was my money, Marcus. Mine. And I did with it what I should have done years ago. I put it where it'll actually matter. Where it'll create a legacy worth leaving. But, Dad, you can't just... He was stammering now. Hands shaking. What about me? What about your family? I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd raised. This man who was supposed to carry my name forward with pride. And I felt nothing. No anger anymore. No sadness. Just clarity. You're right, Marcus. You are my son. And for 41 years. I loved you with everything I had. I worked myself to exhaustion to give you opportunities I never had. I paid for your education, your wedding, your first house down payment. I showed up for you. Every single time. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your father. You started seeing me as your bank account. As an obstacle between you and money you'd already spent in your head. Money you thought you'd earned. Just by being born. Dad, that's not fair. I was trying to help you to protect. No, Marcus. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to control me. I heard you and Vanessa at Mertz 2 months ago, talking about getting power of attorney, about how I only needed $500,000, how the rest should be secured for you. I heard every word. His face went pale. Then red. You were spying on us? I was having dinner. You were plotting to take control of my life. There's a difference. And son, that's when I knew. This wasn't about concern. This was about greed. Pure, simple greed. Marcus stood up. Chair scraping against the floor. Other diners were starting to look over. So what? You're just cutting me out? Your own son? Over some misunderstanding? It's not a misunderstanding, Marcus. And I'm not cutting you out. The foundation. If you ever decide to actually work for something, to contribute something, to understand what legacy really means, there's a seat on that board with your name on it. But you'll have to earn it. Just like I earned everything I have. You want to be part of my legacy? Be someone worth being proud of. I stood up too. Put $200 bills on the table to cover the meal Marcus hadn't touched. The remaining $700,000, that's mine. To live on. To enjoy. To spend exactly how I want. You'll get what's left when I'm gone. If there's anything left. But Marcus, I'm planning to live a long, full, expensive life. So I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you. I walked out of that restaurant, and I didn't look back. The next few weeks were rough. Marcus called 47 times. I counted. I didn't answer. He sent texts. Long paragraphs about how I was being unfair, how I was destroying our relationship, how I'd regret this. Vanessa sent messages too, more aggressive, accusing me of being senile, of being manipulated by people who don't have your best interests at heart. She threatened legal action, said they'd prove I wasn't competent to make these decisions. That's when I sent them the neuropsychological evaluation, the one from Dr. Monroe, showing that I was of completely sound mind, along with a letter from Gerald, explaining that any legal action they attempted would be dismissed immediately, and would probably result in them being cut out of my will entirely. The harassment stopped after that. But something else started. Something I didn't expect got support. Real, genuine support. From people who actually mattered. My pastor called. Told me what I'd done with the foundation was a testament to true Christian values. Dr. Ellis from the community center stopped by my house with a sweet potato pie and tears in her eyes. told me that the scholarship money would change lives, that I was giving kids the same chance someone had once given me. My former employees reached out, men I'd worked alongside for decades, told me they were proud to know me, proud to be part of the foundation board, that what I'd done was what leadership looked like, what real legacy looked like. And slowly, over weeks and months, I realized something. I'd been so focused on Marcus, on this relationship I thought I needed to preserve, that I'd forgotten about all the other relationships in my life, the people who actually valued me, not for what I could give them, but for who I was. In August, the foundation gave out its first scholarship, $25,000 to a young woman named Destiny Richardson, 18 years old, from the same neighborhood I grew up in. Brilliant kid, got accepted to Spelman College, but her family couldn't afford it. The scholarship covered her first year, full tuition, room and board, everything. I met her at the award ceremony, watched her mother cry, watched Destiny stand up and give a speech about how this money was going to change her family's future, how she was going to be the first person in her family to graduate from college, how she was going to come back and give back, just like I had. And I realized this right here, this was legacy. Not money sitting in an account waiting to be spent on German SUVs and vacation homes, but opportunity, hope, a future for someone who reminded me of who I used to be. This mattered. This meant something. Marcus wasn't there. I'd invited him, sent him the details. He didn't respond. And honestly, I was okay with that, because I'd spent months grieving the son I thought I had, the man I'd hoped he'd become. And I'd finally accepted the truth. Marcus had made his choice. He'd chosen money over relationship, entitlement over gratitude. And that was on him, not me. In October, something unexpected happened. I got a letter, handwritten, from Marcus. No return address, just delivered to my mailbox. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. The letter was 3 pages long, and it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was different, more honest than Marcus had been in years. He wrote about how angry he'd been, how he'd felt betrayed, cheated, but then, slowly, he started seeing things differently. He wrote about a conversation he'd had with one of his buddies from college, a guy whose father had left him $600,000, and how that friend, 2 years later, had blown through all of it. Bad investments, expensive lifestyle, nothing to show for it. And how that friend had told Marcus, "I wish my father had taught me how to build wealth instead of just handing it to me, because now I don't know how to do anything but spend," Marcus wrote. "I realize now that's what you were trying to do. Teach me." I didn't want to learn. I just wanted the money, and maybe you saw something in me I didn't want to see in myself. I don't know if this changes anything. I don't know if you'll even read this, but I'm sorry for what I said, for how I acted, for treating you like you were just an inheritance instead of my father. I'm sorry. I read that letter 5 times, sat with it, thought about it, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my son, Marcus. "I got your letter." Silence on the other end. Then, "Dad, I didn't know if I want you to come over. Saturday afternoon. We need to talk, really talk. Not about money, about us, about what matters. Can you do that?" Yeah, Dad, I can do that." That Saturday, Marcus came to my house. Just him, no Vanessa. We sat on my back porch, drank sweet tea, and we talked for hours. I told him about the foundation, about Destiny Richardson, about the community center project we were funding, about the legacy I was building. And then I told him something else, something I'd been thinking about for weeks. "Marcus, there's a seat on that foundation board. with your name on it, if you want it. But you're not going to get it just because you're my son. You're going to have to work for it. I want you to volunteer at the community center every Saturday for 6 months. I want you to mentor young men, kids who need guidance, who need to see what success looks like, what hard work looks like. You do that. You show me you understand what this is really about, and that seat is yours. But only if you earn it. Marcus looked at me, and for the first time in I don't know how long, I saw something in his eyes that looked like humility, like understanding. I'll do it, Dad. I will. I promise. I don't know if Marcus will follow through. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but I gave him the chance. And that's all I can do. The rest is up to him, because at the end of the day, I learned something important through all of this. You can't force someone to have character. You can't make someone understand what really matters. All you can do is live your values, build your legacy, and hope that eventually the people you love will see the light. I'm 68 years old. I have $700,000 in the bank, a charitable foundation that'll outlive me by decades, and a community that knows my name, not because of the money I made, but because of what I did with it. That's legacy. That's what matters. And if Marcus never understands that, well, I'll be disappointed, but I'll be okay, because I know I did the right thing. My son demanded I stop wasting his inheritance. So I taught him the truth. It was never his. It was never about him. It was about purpose, about impact, about building something that matters, and the money in his bank account, the money he thought he was entitled to, that said $0. Because entitlement doesn't earn you anything. It just shows you who you really are. And sometimes, that's the most valuable lesson of all. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about what legacy means to you. And stick around, because we've got more stories like this coming. Stories about dignity, about justice, about what happens when people finally get what they've earned, the good and the bad. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.